You think you own me, but tonight you'll learn the truth. The words hang in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Colonel Evelyn Carter sits at the head of her mahogany dining table, her weathered hands steady as granite despite the storm brewing in her chest. At 78, she carries herself with the precision of someone who commanded respect in foxholes and war rooms across 3 continents. The crystal chandelier above casts harsh shadows across the faces of the 2 men who have drained her soul for decades. Richard Carter, her 82-year-old husband, slouches in his chair with that familiar smirk that once charmed her in a USO dance hall in 1965. Now it cuts like a rusty blade. Tonight feels different. The air crackles with 30 years of swallowed rage. Across from Richard sits Michael Carter, 35 years old, lieutenant bars gleaming on his dress uniform. The son she adopted at 5, loved like her own blood, raised with military discipline and unconditional devotion. His dark eyes hold the same cruel gleam as his father's. The dining room that once hosted celebration dinners now feels like a tomb. Wedding china sits untouched between them. The pot roast Evelyn spent 4 hours preparing grows cold as stone. Richard clears his throat, that theatrical sound that always precedes his manipulation. His fingers drum against the table with calculated rhythm. The sound echoes like distant artillery in Evelyn's mind, triggering memories of mistakes she buried in classified files decades ago. Those mistakes. The ones that cost lives in Kandahar. The ones Richard discovered in her private papers 5 years after their wedding. The ones he has wielded like a weapon ever since, keeping her trapped in this prison of guilt and financial servitude. Michael leans back in his chair, uniform immaculate, but his soul rotted from years of entitlement. His voice cuts through the silence with the precision of a sniper's bullet. Old soldier, he calls her. Useless relic whose only weapon left is money. The words slice through Evelyn's chest deeper than shrapnel. This boy she raised, fed, clothed, put through West Point with her colonel's pension and military connections. This ungrateful child who stands where he stands because of her sacrifice. Richard's smile widens. He taught Michael well, taught him that Evelyn owes them everything, that her past mistakes make her their personal ATM machine. That guilt is the strongest chain ever forged. The grandfather clock in the corner ticks like a countdown to detonation. Evelyn's pulse hammers in her temples. 43 years of military service. Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Combat veteran who led men through hell and brought them home alive. Reduced to this, a checkbook for parasites wearing her own name. Michael continues his assault, every word calculated to wound. He calls her weak, pathetic, a burden they tolerate only for her monthly deposits into their accounts. His voice grows louder, more vicious, feeding off Richard's approving nods. Something snaps inside Evelyn's chest like a tripwire. Her palm crashes against the mahogany table with the force of a mortar round. China jumps. Wine glasses tremble. Both men freeze as if a drill sergeant just entered their barracks. The sound reverberates through the house like thunder. Evelyn rises to her full height, shoulders squared, chin lifted with the authority that once commanded battalions. Her voice drops to that deadly quiet tone every soldier knows means incoming fire. Not one more dime, she declares. Not one more dollar from her accounts to fund their lazy, entitled existence. The free ride ends tonight. The manipulation stops here. Richard's smirk falters. Michael's mouth hangs open like a fish gasping for air. They never expected resistance from their broken-down cash cow. But Evelyn is far from finished. 30 years of truth burns in her throat, demanding release. The adoption papers, she continues, her voice gaining strength like artillery finding its range. The ones Richard made her sign when Michael was 5. The desperate single mother Richard abandoned. The child he refused to acknowledge until it became convenient. The room falls silent except for the ticking clock and 3 sets of ragged breathing. Michael is not her adopted son. He never was. He is Richard's biological child with another woman. His illegitimate son that Richard pawned off on Evelyn to avoid responsibility and scandal. The truth detonates like a grenade in the center of the table. Michael's face drains of color. His hands shake as the foundation of his entire identity crumbles beneath him. The woman he has tormented for years is not even his real mother. She chose to love him anyway. Richard's mouth works soundlessly, caught in his own web of deception. His carefully constructed house of cards collapses in real time. Evelyn stands over them both, like the commanding officer she trained to be. The scared, guilty woman who entered this room no longer exists. In her place stands a colonel who survived warfare in 3 theaters and will not surrender her dignity to these domestic terrorists. Michael stumbles backward, his chair scraping against hardwood like fingernails on a coffin. Richard grabs the table edge, knuckles white as bone. The dining room transforms into a battlefield. 30 years of lies explode like cluster bombs. Accusations fly like bullets. Michael screams. Richard blusters. Voices escalate beyond recognition. Evelyn watches the chaos with the calm of someone who has faced enemy fire and lived to tell about it. This is not her war anymore. She is done fighting for people who never deserved her sacrifice. A wine glass hits the floor and shatters into 1,000 pieces. Silverware follows, clattering against hardwood like spent shell casings. The sound echoes through the house like the final notes of a funeral dirge. In that moment, Evelyn Carter reclaims her soul. The shattered wine glass on the dining room floor reflects fragments of a memory Evelyn Carter has tried to bury for 30 years. Each jagged piece mirrors the day that changed everything. The day her military honor became Richard's weapon. Afghanistan, 2003. The dust still tastes like copper pennies in her mouth when she closes her eyes. Colonel Carter leads Bravo Company through a sandstorm that turns the world into a hellscape of brown fury. Visibility drops to 0. Radio static crackles through the chaos as enemy fire erupts from positions her intelligence report missed entirely. She had trusted faulty reconnaissance. Her mistake. Her responsibility. Her soldiers paying the price. 3 good men never made it home because she miscalculated the Taliban's movement patterns. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Private First Class Kim, Corporal Williams. Their names burned into her soul like brands on cattle. But covering up the intelligence failure saved her remaining unit from a disastrous court-martial that would have destroyed careers and shattered families. 32 soldiers kept their honor because she buried the truth in classified files. The weight of command demands impossible choices. Save the living or honor the dead. She chose the living. Richard found those files 5 years later, hidden in her home office between deployment photos and commendation letters. Her husband, who once promised to love and protect her, became her personal executioner. The classified documents became his insurance policy, his guarantee of a comfortable retirement funded by her guilt and military pension. Every month for 25 years, she has paid the price of her wartime decision. Now, standing in her destroyed dining room, Evelyn watches Richard's face cycle through panic, rage, and desperate calculation. Michael clutches the table edge like a drowning man grasping driftwood. Both men realize their golden goose just grew fangs. Richard's voice shakes when he reminds her of the debt of silence. How her covered-up mistake could still destroy what remains of her military legacy. How the families of those 3 dead soldiers deserve to know the truth about their sons' deaths. His words hit like psychological warfare. Guilt is his favorite ammunition, and he never misses his target. But something fundamental has shifted in Evelyn's core. The scared woman who walked into this dining room no longer exists. In her place stands a combat veteran who survived mortar fire, enemy ambushes, and bureaucratic warfare for 4 decades. Michael tries a different approach. His voice turns soft, manipulative, reminding her of bedtime stories and little league games. How she raised him from a frightened 5-year-old into a military officer. How much he loves and needs her. The irony cuts deeper than a bayonet. The illegitimate child she chose to love, despite his parentage, now weaponizes that love against her. Every soccer game she attended, every college tuition payment, every proud moment at his commissioning ceremony has become ammunition in their war against her dignity. For 30 years, These men have fed off her sacrifice like parasites. They built their entire existence on her guilt, her honor, her unwillingness to abandon her responsibilities, even when those responsibilities became chains. Richard enjoyed retirement funded by her military benefits while criticizing her weakness. Michael coasted through West Point on her connections while mocking her outdated values. Both men lived like kings on the blood money of her buried shame. The sandstorm memory shifts in her mind. She remembers the weight of her rifle, the sound of helicopters cutting through desert wind, the absolute authority in her voice when she commanded men twice her size to follow her into hell. That woman never begged, never cowered, never accepted abuse from subordinates or equals. Evelyn straightens to her full height, and for the first time in decades, she feels like a colonel again. Her voice carries the steel that once silenced entire barracks with a whisper. "No more," she declares. "The debt is paid. The silence is broken. The manipulation ends tonight." Richard stumbles over his words, trying to invoke their wedding vows, their shared history, the scandal that would destroy them all. His desperation tastes like victory in Evelyn's mouth. Michael threatens to cut contact, to take away the grandchildren she never had, to expose her military secrets to the media. His panic feeds her growing strength like rocket fuel. They cannot understand that she has already lost everything that mattered. Her self-respect, her autonomy, her identity as a soldier and leader. Everything else is just noise. The dining room clock chimes 9 times, marking the death of their 30-year con game. Evelyn moves through the wreckage of dinner with the purposeful stride of someone executing a long overdue battle plan. She pulls her cell phone from her uniform pocket with steady hands. Her fingers find a number she has not dialed in 3 years. Master Sergeant Patricia Shaw, her old communications officer, now living in Seattle. Patricia always said the door was open, always promised a place to land if Evelyn ever found the courage to jump from this burning plane of a marriage. Tonight, courage tossed is like freedom. The phone rings once before Patricia's familiar voice cuts through the static of 30 years. Strong, reliable, unchanged by time or distance. Evelyn closes her eyes and speaks the words that will change everything. "I need backup," she whispers. "I'm ready to come home." Behind her, Richard and Michael continue their desperate damage control, but their voices fade like distant artillery fire. The real war is over. The colonel has finally reclaimed her command. The morning light cuts through Evelyn's kitchen like interrogation spotlights. 24 hours since the dinner that shattered 30 years of lies, and the silence in her house feels heavier than combat gear. Her phone sits on the counter like an unexploded grenade. She knows it will ring. She knows Michael will call with his demands, his threats, his desperate attempts to resurrect their financial arrangement. The call comes at exactly 0800 hours, military precision even in his desperation. Michael's voice explodes through the speaker with the fury of incoming mortars. He demands $15,000 by noon. Rent money, he claims. Emergency expenses that cannot wait. His tone shifts from pleading to menacing within seconds. The boy she raised has learned Richard's manipulation tactics too well. Every word calculated to wound, to control, to extract compliance through emotional warfare. If she refuses, he will expose everything. The Afghanistan cover-up, the classified files, the 3 dead soldiers whose families still believe their sons died heroes instead of victims of command negligence. Evelyn listens to his rant with the detached calm of someone monitoring enemy radio chatter. This stranger, wearing her son's voice, threatens to destroy what remains of her military legacy, unless she submits to his financial extortion. The irony tastes like artillery smoke in her mouth. The child she saved from poverty and abandonment now holds her honor hostage for grocery money. When Michael finally pauses for breath, Evelyn's response comes as steady as sniper fire. No. The word hangs in the air like a declaration of war. Michael explodes into threats and accusations. He calls her selfish, cruel, abandoning family when they need her most. His voice cracks with genuine panic as he realizes his golden goose has finally grown a spine. Evelyn ends the call without another word. The silence that follows feels like the moments after a firefight, when smoke clears and casualties are counted. She moves through her empty house like a ghost haunting her own life. Every room holds memories of service, sacrifice, and the gradual erosion of her identity. The living room where Richard spent years reminding her of her debt. The kitchen where she cooked countless meals for ungrateful men. On her dining room table, she spreads out the artifacts of her real life. Bronze star medal, gleaming despite 30 years in a jewelry box. Purple Heart earned in Kuwait when shrapnel painted her shoulder crimson. Silver star for extraordinary gallantry under enemy fire. Next to the medals, she unfolds field maps from 3 different theaters of war: Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait. Each one marked with coordinates of battles fought, objectives secured, lives saved and lost under her command. Letters from fallen comrades cover the remaining space. Final messages from soldiers who trusted her leadership, who followed her into hell because they believed she would bring them home alive. Most did come home. Some did not. The faces stare at her from faded photographs. Young men and women who gave everything for their country, their unit, their colonel. They trusted her with their lives, and she earned that trust through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication to their welfare. This is who she really is. Not Richard's guilty wife or Michael's personal bank account. She is Colonel Evelyn Carter, combat veteran, leader of warriors, survivor of conflicts that would break lesser souls. Her phone rings again. Richard this time, his voice dripping with the condescending tone she has endured for 3 decades. He speaks slowly, like addressing a particularly stupid recruit, reminding her of their arrangement. Michael told him about her refusal to pay. Now Richard plays his ace card, threatening to expose her classified cover-up unless she remembers her place in their family hierarchy. His voice grows nastier as he describes exactly what he will tell the military investigators. How Colonel Carter sacrificed 3 good soldiers to save her own career. How she buried evidence and falsified reports to protect her reputation. The media attention alone would destroy her legacy, he promises. Congressional hearings, criminal investigations, her name dragged through every newspaper and cable news program in America. But something unexpected happens as Richard delivers his familiar threats. Instead of fear, Evelyn feels a cold rage building in her chest, like fuel injected into jet engines. She walks to her bathroom mirror while Richard continues his psychological warfare. The woman staring back has steel gray hair and 78 years of hard living etched into her face. But her eyes still hold the fire that burned through desert storms and urban warfare. "I am still a soldier," she whispers to her reflection. "I do not take orders anymore." The words unlock something buried deep in her warrior soul. For 30 years, she has played defense, absorbing attacks, protecting her flanks, retreating from every battle to preserve what little remained of her dignity. But colonels are not trained for retreat. They are trained for victory through superior firepower and tactical advantage. And Evelyn Carter has both weapons at her disposal. Richard continues his threats through the phone speaker, but his voice fades to background noise. Evelyn's mind shifts into combat mode, calculating assets, identifying enemy weaknesses, planning offensive operations. She has spent 3 decades protecting Richard and Michael from the consequences of their choices. Time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. Time to remind them that military training includes more than just taking punishment. Time for revenge. For the first time in 30 years, Colonel Evelyn Carter smiles like a predator who has finally chosen her prey. The doorbell rings at 1,400 hours, cutting through the silence of Evelyn's war room dining table. She expects another confrontation, another demand, another threat from the men who have poisoned her life for 30 years. Instead, she opens the door to a ghost from her finest hour. Colonel Marcus Hall stands on her porch like salvation in a dress uniform. 80 years old, silver-haired, shoulders still square despite decades of civilian life. His eyes hold the same steady warmth that kept her sane through 3 tours of hell. "Evelyn," he says, his voice carrying the authority that once commanded respect in Pentagon briefing rooms. "We need to talk." She has not seen Marcus in 15 years, not since his retirement ceremony in Washington. But seeing him now feels like finding water in the desert. Here stands someone who knew her when she was a warrior, not a victim. Marcus steps into her house with the confident stride of someone who belongs everywhere he goes. His eyes sweep over the medals and maps scattered across her dining table, taking inventory like a commanding officer reviewing battle plans. "Still fighting the same war, I see," he observes with a slight smile. "Time to win it." They sit across from each other at the same table where her family imploded 48 hours ago. Marcus pulls a sealed letter from his jacket pocket and slides it across the mahogany surface like classified intelligence. The envelope bears her name in his precise military handwriting. Inside, 3 sentences that hit harder than enemy fire. "You are not alone. You still have your rank, your name, your honor. Time to use them." Evelyn looks up to find Marcus watching her with the patience of someone who has waited decades for this conversation. His presence fills the room with memories of competence, of purpose, of the woman she used to be before guilt became her prison warden. Marcus breaks the silence with a question that sounds like friendly curiosity but cuts to the bone. "How long have they been bleeding you dry, Colonel?" The title hits like a physical blow. When was the last time someone called her Colonel instead of Mom or Honey or Old Woman? When was the last time someone acknowledged her rank, her service, her right to respect? Her story spills out like a debriefing after combat. Afghanistan, the covered-up intelligence failure, Richard's blackmail, Michael's entitled demands, 30 years of financial and emotional extortion, disguised as family loyalty. Marcus listens without judgment, occasionally nodding like a therapist who has heard worse stories. When she finishes, his response comes with the directness that made him legendary among junior officers. "They played you well," he admits. "Used your honor against you like psychological warfare. Classic manipulation tactics." But Marcus was there in Afghanistan. He witnessed the sandstorm, the impossible choices, the 3 soldiers who paid the ultimate price for faulty intelligence. He knows the truth about her so-called cover-up. "You saved 32 men that day," he reminds her. 3 died because of bad intel from higher up the chain. You took the blame to protect your surviving unit from a court-martial that would have destroyed careers and families. His words crack something open in Evelyn's chest. For 30 years, she has carried the guilt of command decisions made in impossible circumstances. Marcus reminds her that good leaders make hard choices and live with the consequences. The conversation shifts as Marcus shares updates from their old unit. Rodriguez's son graduated from West Point last year. Kim's daughter became a doctor. William's father still sends Christmas cards thanking Evelyn for bringing his boy's body home. "These families honor her memory," Marcus explains. "They never blamed her for their losses because they understand something Richard and Michael never will. War demands sacrifice, and leaders bear the heaviest burden." Laughter erupts unexpectedly as Marcus recalls their legendary arguments during desert deployments. How Evelyn once dressed down a 2-star general for questioning her tactical decisions. How she outdrank, outfought, and outthought every officer who tried to underestimate her. "Remember when you made that brigadier general cry?" Marcus chuckles. "Man claimed women couldn't handle combat command. You had him transferred to logistics within a week." For the first time in decades, Evelyn feels like herself again. Not the broken woman Richard created or the ATM machine Michael exploits. She is Colonel Carter, combat veteran, leader of warriors, someone who earned respect through blood and competence. Marcus leans forward with the intensity of someone delivering a classified briefing. His voice drops to the conspiratorial tone they once used, planning night raids and strategic operations. "You still have friends in high places, Colonel. People who remember what you did, who you protected, who owes you favors. Your network spans 3 decades of military leadership." The implication hangs in the air like artillery smoke. Richard and Michael have spent 30 years assuming Evelyn is powerless, isolated, dependent on their approval for survival. They never considered that colonels build alliances, maintain connections, command loyalty that transcends retirement. Marcus slides a business card across the table. Contact information for Patricia Shaw in Seattle. Below her number, a handwritten note promising sanctuary, support, and the chance to rebuild her life among people who actually value her contributions. Time to stop playing defense, Marcus continues. Time to remind your family that colonels are trained for victory, not surrender. Time to flip the script and let them face the consequences of their own choices. Evelyn stares at the card, feeling possibility replace despair for the first time in 30 years. Behind Marcus's steady gaze, she sees reflected the woman she used to be, the woman she can become again. I am still a soldier, she whispers. Marcus smiles like a commanding officer whose best lieutenant just accepted a dangerous but necessary mission. Then, let us plan your counterattack, Colonel. The transformation begins at 0500 hours the next morning. For the first time in 30 years, Evelyn Carter wakes before dawn without an alarm clock. Her internal military chronometer has reactivated like a dormant weapon system coming online. She laces her running shoes with the precision of someone loading ammunition. The neighborhood streets become her patrol route as she pounds pavement with the steady rhythm of a soldier marching toward battle. Her body protests after decades of civilian softness, but her mind feels sharper than a bayonet. Each step burns away years of defeat, replacing weakness with the iron discipline that once carried her through desert warfare and Pentagon politics. Marcus arrives at 0700 with coffee and a tactical briefing. His kitchen table conference feels like mission planning sessions from their glory days. Maps replaced by laptops, coordinates replaced by phone numbers, but the objective remains crystal clear. Gather intelligence, identify targets, execute with precision. The evidence has been hiding in plain sight for 30 years. Richard's personnel files reveal a pattern of misconduct that would make a drill sergeant blush. Financial irregularities during his logistics assignments, inappropriate relationships with subordinates, cover-ups that make Evelyn's wartime decision look like a parking ticket. Michael's record tells an even uglier story. Falsified fitness reports, plagiarized training documents, sexual harassment complaints that mysteriously disappeared through his connections to Evelyn's influence network. These men built their careers on her reputation while destroying hers through blackmail and manipulation. The irony tastes like copper pennies in her mouth. Marcus guides her through the bureaucratic maze with the skill of someone who spent 40 years navigating military politics. His contacts span every branch of service, every oversight committee, every internal affairs department that matters. By noon, they have compiled a dossier that would make Pentagon investigators salivate. Financial records, witness statements, internal memos, service records, a paper trail of corruption spanning 3 decades. Evelyn's fingers fly across her laptop keyboard with the efficiency of someone who once filed combat reports under enemy fire. Each paragraph builds like artillery shells finding their target. Each citation hits like sniper rounds through the heart of Richard and Michael's carefully constructed lies. The Army Oversight Committee contact comes through Marcus's network. Colonel Jennifer Hayes, Internal Affairs Division, a woman who built her career prosecuting misconduct cases involving senior officers and their families. Hayes listens to their preliminary briefing with the intensity of someone who has seen every variation of military corruption. When Evelyn finishes her summary, Hayes's response comes with the authority of someone who holds actual power. Send me everything, Colonel Carter. We have been waiting 30 years for someone with your credibility to come forward. The revelation hits like incoming mortar fire. Other victims have tried to expose Richard's pattern of abuse and manipulation. Other families destroyed by his systematic exploitation of military relationships. But none carried the weight of a decorated combat veteran with an impeccable service record. Evelyn Carter is not just seeking personal revenge. She is becoming the tip of the spear for systemic justice. Her daily routine shifts into military precision. 0500 hours physical training, 0630 hours briefing with Marcus, 0800 hours intelligence gathering and report writing, 1,200 hours tactical planning sessions. For the first time since Afghanistan, she feels like a colonel again. The evidence file grows thicker each day. Richard's misconduct includes financial fraud, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His crimes span multiple deployments and duty stations, protected by Evelyn's reputation and his talent for finding vulnerable targets. Michael's violations include falsified documents, inappropriate conduct with enlisted personnel, and using his adoptive connection to Evelyn for personal advancement. His entire military career reads like a textbook case of nepotism and corruption. But the most damning evidence comes from their own mouths. 30 years of recorded phone conversations, saved voicemails, and email threads, where they openly discuss their manipulation tactics and mock Evelyn's guilt-driven compliance. They documented their own crimes with the arrogance of people who believed they were untouchable. Thursday morning arrives like D-Day. Evelyn sits at her dining room table surrounded by 30 years of accumulated evidence. 3 filing boxes contain enough documentation to end careers, trigger criminal investigations, and expose a network of corruption that reaches into multiple military installations. Her hands remain steady as she types the cover letter that will detonate like a nuclear weapon in the Pentagon's Internal Affairs Division. Each sentence cuts with surgical precision. Every paragraph builds toward inevitable justice. She signs the document with her full military identification. Colonel Evelyn Marie Carter, United States Army, serial number 1283, 456789, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Silver Star recipient. This is not revenge born of spite or personal vendetta. This is justice delivered through proper military channels by someone with the authority and credibility to demand accountability. She attaches 30 years of evidence with the clinical efficiency of someone filing combat reports, financial records, personnel files, witness statements, audio recordings, email threads, text message screenshots. A comprehensive case file that transforms personal betrayal into systematic prosecution. The email sends at exactly 1,200 hours. No fanfare, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet click of justice, finally finding its target after 3 decades of misdirection. Evelyn leans back in her chair and allows herself the first genuine smile she has experienced in years. The counterattack has begun. The battlefield is chosen. The enemy positions are mapped and targeted. For the first time in 30 years, Colonel Carter holds the tactical advantage. Let the family battle come. This time, she chooses the terms of engagement. The first dominoes fall on a Tuesday morning that starts like any other, but ends like the apocalypse. Evelyn sips coffee at her kitchen table when her phone rings with news that tastes sweeter than victory champagne. Colonel Hayes delivers her report with military precision. Richard Carter is under formal investigation for financial misconduct, spanning 15 years of active duty. Evidence includes falsified expense reports, misappropriated government funds, and abuse of his logistics position for personal gain. The investigation moves with the swift efficiency of a well-planned military operation. Decades of buried complaints suddenly find sympathetic ears. Witnesses who feared retaliation now step forward with testimonies that paint Richard as a serial predator who exploited his rank and connections. Michael's suspension comes 3 hours later. Lieutenant Carter is relieved of duty pending investigation into falsified training documents, plagiarized reports, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His security clearance is suspended immediately. Evelyn absorbs each update with the calm satisfaction of someone watching artillery shells find their designated targets. 30 years of patience and planning have finally detonated with devastating accuracy. The phone calls start within minutes of the official notifications. Richard's voice explodes through her speaker like incoming mortar fire, but his rage no longer carries the power to wound. His threats sound hollow, desperate, pathetic. Michael calls next, his voice cracking with panic and disbelief. How could she do this to family? How could she destroy everything they built together? His questions reveal the depth of his delusion about their relationship. They demand an emergency family meeting. One last attempt to salvage their sinking ship through emotional manipulation and shared guilt. Evelyn agrees to meet them, but not as their victim. This time she comes as their judge. The dining room where their toxic dynasty began now becomes its burial ground. Richard sits across from her wearing his dress uniform like armor against the coming storm. Every ribbon and medal on his chest represents a lie, a stolen honor, a career built on her sacrifice. Michael enters looking like a broken man. His lieutenant bars seem to weigh 1,000 pounds on shoulders that can no longer carry the burden of his false identity. The golden boy who once mocked her strength now trembles like a child facing punishment. Richard launches into his familiar script of guilt and manipulation. How she has destroyed their family over petty grievances. How her vindictive actions will ruin innocent lives. How she owes them loyalty, protection, silence in exchange for their love. But his words bounce off Evelyn like bullets hitting armor plating. She has heard this speech for 30 years. Today, it sounds like the desperate pleading of a defeated enemy. The mask finally slips when Richard realizes his psychological warfare no longer works. His voice rises to a roar as he calls her a traitor, a vindictive witch, a pathetic old woman who cannot accept her place in their hierarchy. His true face emerges like a monster shedding its human disguise. 30 years of hidden contempt pour out in a torrent of abuse that would have destroyed her months ago. Now it only confirms the wisdom of her counterattack. Michael attempts a different strategy. Tears stream down his face as he begs for mercy, for understanding, for one more chance to make things right. His breakdown looks genuine until he starts making demands. He needs her to call Colonel Hayes, to withdraw her testimony, to use her influence to make the investigations disappear. Even in collapse, he expects her to fix his problems with her connections and reputation. "You ruined my life," he screams when she refuses his desperate pleas. Every word drips with self-pity and wounded entitlement. Evelyn's response cuts through his hysteria like a blade through flesh. Her voice carries the cold authority of someone delivering a death sentence. "I saved mine." 3 words that summarize 30 years of exploitation and her final moment of liberation. She did not ruin his life. She stopped letting him ruin hers. The truth detonates in the dining room like a cluster bomb. Richard's face contorts with rage as he realizes his golden goose has not just flown away but burned down the entire coop. Michael collapses into sobbing hysteria as the full weight of consequences crashes over him. Richard pounds the mahogany table with both fists, his metals jangling like chains on a ghost. The sound echoes through the house like artillery fire, but Evelyn no longer flinches at loud noises or sudden movements. She has been to war. She has faced enemy fire. 2 spoiled men throwing tantrums in her dining room register as minor annoyances compared to combat operations in hostile territory. Michael's breakdown accelerates into complete emotional collapse. He slides from his chair to the floor, curled in a fetal position, wailing about unfairness and betrayal. The lieutenant who once stood proud in his dress uniform now writhes like a child, denied his favorite toy. Evelyn watches their meltdown with the detached interest of someone observing a successful bombing mission from a safe distance. These men spent 30 years feeding off her guilt, her honor, her desperate need to protect family, even when they did not deserve protection. Now they face the world without her shield, her connections, her money. The reality terrifies them more than combat ever frightened her. She rises from the table with the dignity of someone who has finally remembered her own worth. Her movement toward the door sends both men into renewed panic. They scramble to block her exit, to trap her in one more negotiation, one more guilt session. But Colonel Evelyn Carter does not retreat from defeated enemies. The front door slams behind her with the finality of a coffin lid closing. 30 years of toxic family obligation die in that sound. The cord that strangled her spirit for 3 decades snaps like overstressed cable. Behind her, Richard and Michael continue their death throes in an empty house that no longer belongs to them. Ahead lies Seattle, freedom, and the life she should have claimed decades ago. The Boeing 737 lifts off from Reagan National Airport, carrying Evelyn Carter toward a life she never imagined possible. Below her, the city where she fought bureaucratic battles and political wars shrinks to toy soldier proportions. Above her, endless blue sky stretches toward freedom. Seattle greets her with the kind of drizzle that washes away old sins and waters new beginnings. Marcus waits at baggage claim, wearing a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt and the biggest grin she has seen in 30 years. His hug feels like coming home after a lifetime of exile. "Welcome to your new life, Colonel," he says with the warmth of someone who has planned this rescue mission for decades. Patricia Shaw's guest cottage sits on a hill overlooking Elliott Bay, surrounded by gardens that bloom with possibilities instead of buried resentments. For the first time in 30 years, Evelyn wakes up in a house where no one demands money, guilt, or apologies for existing. The transformation happens gradually, like physical therapy after a severe injury. First come the small freedoms: coffee without criticism, breakfast without demands, mornings without the weight of other people's expectations crushing her shoulders. Marcus proves to be a terrible roommate in the most endearing ways. His coffee tastes like battery acid mixed with regret. His attempts at domestic life result in burnt toast, shrunk laundry, and a kitchen that looks like a combat zone after meal preparation. Evelyn finds herself laughing at his disasters, then taking over with the efficiency of someone who ran military mess halls. She corrects his coffee-making stance like addressing a rookie soldier, hands on his shoulders, guiding him through proper technique. "You are holding that filter like a live grenade," she teases. "Relax your grip or you will never make it through basic training." Their domestic routine develops the comfortable rhythm of old soldiers who trust each other completely. Marcus handles logistics and transportation. Evelyn manages nutrition and household operations. Both contribute war stories and gentle mockery in equal measure. The Seattle Veterans Club welcomes her like a long-lost sister returning from hostile territory. These are her people: combat veterans who understand nightmares, service members who carry invisible wounds, leaders who made impossible decisions under enemy fire. For the first time in decades, Evelyn finds herself among people who honor her service instead of exploiting her guilt. They listen to her Afghanistan stories with respect instead of judgment. They value her experience instead of using it against her. Senior yoga class becomes her new favorite deployment. The instructor, a former Navy medic named Sarah, guides them through poses designed for bodies that have absorbed shrapnel, survived combat stress, and earned the right to move slowly without apology. Evelyn discovers muscles she forgot she had, flexibility that military training never addressed, and the profound peace that comes from breathing without hypervigilance. Her warrior body learns to exist without preparing for constant battle. The Pike Place Market becomes her Saturday morning patrol route. She walks through crowds of tourists and locals, savoring the chaos of civilian life. Fresh flowers replace ammunition in her mental inventory. Coffee vendors replace supply sergeants in her daily briefings. Marcus accompanies her on these expeditions, carrying her packages with the gallantry of someone who spent 40 years opening doors for female officers. Their friendship deepens into something warmer, more intimate, seasoned with decades of mutual respect. Back in Virginia, the aftermath of her tactical strike continues to unfold like delayed detonation charges. Richard signs divorce papers with hands that shake from more than age. The man who spent 30 years as her emotional dictator now faces life without a victim to subsidize his failures. His lawyer delivers updates through Marcus's network. Richard's pension barely covers basic living expenses. His misconduct investigation resulted in reduction of benefits and loss of veterans' privileges. The man who weaponized her military mistakes now faces the consequences of his own. Michael's transformation proves more promising. Stripped of his security clearance and military career, he begins therapy with the desperation of someone finally facing reality. His therapist works through decades of entitlement, manipulation, and learned helplessness. For the first time in his life, Michael must find employment, manage finances, and function without Evelyn's connections, protecting him from consequences. The process terrifies and liberates him in equal measure. His therapy sessions reveal the depth of Richard's psychological abuse, the toxic family dynamics that turned him into a weapon against the woman who raised him. Slowly, painfully, he begins to understand the magnitude of his betrayal and the cost of his redemption. In Seattle, Evelyn experiences emotions she thought were casualties of war. Joy returns first, bubbling up during Marcus's cooking disasters and Veterans Club storytelling sessions. Peace follows, settling into her bones during yoga practice and market walks. Romance creeps in like dawn breaking over mountains, so gradually she almost misses its arrival. Marcus's casual touches linger longer. Their conversations drift toward memories of youth, dreams deferred, possibilities that seemed impossible until now. One evening, as they watch sunset paint Elliott Bay in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus takes her hand with the reverence of someone handling precious cargo. His fingers intertwine with hers, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their match. "I should have done this 40 years ago," he admits, his voice carrying the weight of decades of missed opportunities. Evelyn squeezes his hand with the strength of someone who has learned that timing matters less than courage. "We were not ready 40 years ago," she replies. "We had wars to fight, careers to build, mistakes to survive." Their first kiss tastes like second chances and hard-won wisdom. Like veterans who have earned the right to gentleness after lifetimes of combat. Like two people who finally understand that love is not about need or manipulation, but about choosing each other from positions of strength. Seattle spreads below them like a promise kept, a future finally worth fighting for. The Seattle Veterans Club stands at attention as Colonel Evelyn Carter approaches the podium. 6 months ago, she was a broken woman trapped in a toxic family prison. Tonight, she stands before 50 combat veterans as their guest speaker, shoulders squared with the authority that once commanded battalions. The room holds the quiet respect reserved for decorated officers who earned their rank through blood and competence. Bronze Star recipients, Purple Heart veterans, combat survivors who understand the weight of leadership and the price of honor. Marcus sits in the front row, his eyes bright with pride and something deeper. Behind him, Patricia Shaw nods encouragement. Around them, faces reflect the recognition that passes between warriors who have walked through hell and emerged stronger. Evelyn's voice carries the clarity of someone who has rediscovered her purpose after decades of confusion. Her speech begins with 3 words that define everything she has learned about survival and redemption: honor, discipline, and self-respect. The concepts that built her military career and nearly destroyed her civilian life. Tonight, she reclaims them as weapons of liberation instead of tools of manipulation. Honor, she explains, is not about perfect decisions or flawless execution. Honor is about taking responsibility for your choices, protecting those under your command, and refusing to use past mistakes as excuses for present failures. Her voice carries across the room like a commander addressing troops before a crucial mission. Every veteran in the audience understands the weight of impossible decisions made under enemy fire. They recognize the difference between tactical errors and moral failures. Discipline, she continues, means setting boundaries that protect your integrity even when family demands you abandon your principles. It means saying no to people who exploit your love for their personal gain. It means choosing your battles and fighting only for causes that honor your service. The room remains silent except for the occasional murmur of agreement. These veterans know about discipline under pressure, about maintaining standards when chaos threatens to destroy everything you value. Self-respect, Evelyn concludes, is the foundation that makes honor and discipline possible. You cannot serve others effectively until you value yourself enough to demand fair treatment. You cannot protect your soldiers if you refuse to protect your own dignity. Her eyes find Marcus in the front row, and for the first time in 30 years, her smile contains no shadow of fear or guilt. The woman who once cowered under threats now stands before her peers with the confidence of someone who has won her most important battle. The applause that follows sounds like thunder rolling across distant mountains. 50 veterans rise to their feet in recognition of someone who fought her way back from defeat to claim victory on her own terms. After the ceremony, Marcus walks her to the waterfront under Seattle's star-filled sky. Elliott Bay stretches before them like a promise of infinite possibility. The city lights reflect on dark water like beacons guiding ships safely to harbor. Behind them, the Veterans Club glows with warmth and camaraderie. Ahead lies their shared future, built on mutual respect instead of manipulation, seasoned with wisdom instead of bitterness. Marcus takes her hand with the gentleness of someone handling precious cargo. 6 months ago, touching her felt like defusing a bomb. Tonight, her fingers intertwine with his like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their perfect match. 3,000 miles away, different stories unfold with the harsh justice that follows decades of exploitation. Richard Carter sits alone in a studio apartment that smells like failure and regret. The man who once commanded respect through intimidation now faces each day without anyone to bully or blame. His divorce settlement left him with minimal assets and maximum isolation. Former friends avoid his calls. Military connections refuse his requests for assistance. The network he spent 30 years assuming would protect him has vanished like smoke from extinguished fires. Richard discovers what Evelyn always knew but never voiced. Respect earned through fear disappears the moment fear is removed. Love extracted through guilt dies when guilt transforms into anger. Power built on manipulation crumbles when victims refuse to remain powerless. Michael's journey proves more hopeful but equally difficult. Therapy sessions strip away layers of entitlement and learned helplessness, like removing infected bandages from healing wounds. For the first time in his life, he faces reality without Evelyn's connections, protecting him from consequences. Job applications pile up on his kitchen table. Entry-level positions for someone whose military career ended in disgrace. The work is honest but humbling, for a man who expected success without effort, privilege without responsibility. His therapist helps him understand the toxic family dynamics that shaped his behavior. How Richard used him as a weapon against Evelyn. How their financial arrangements corrupted every relationship in the household. How breaking free required losing everything he thought he wanted. Michael begins to glimpse the possibility of genuine independence. Not the fake autonomy of someone supported by hidden subsidies, but the real freedom that comes from earning your own respect through honest effort. Back in Seattle, Evelyn stands on Pier 70, wearing her old army coat like armor against the Pacific wind. The wool still carries the weight of decades, but now those years feel like accumulated wisdom instead of crushing burden. Her red scarf streams behind her like a battle standard carried by victorious troops. The woman who once retreated from every conflict now faces the future with the confidence of someone who chose her final battlefield and emerged triumphant. The bay stretches endlessly before her, dark water meeting infinite sky. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies her past, buried under years of guilt and manipulation. Here, with salt wind filling her lungs and Marcus's love warming her heart, lies her future. She closes her eyes and speaks words that summarize her entire journey, from victim to victor. Her voice carries across the water like a prayer of gratitude, a declaration of independence, a warrior's final report. I won my last battle, and this time, I fought for me. The words fade into Seattle night like smoke from extinguished fires, carrying away 30 years of defeat and leaving behind the unshakable peace that belongs only to those who refuse to surrender their souls to unworthy causes.